If I tell you how it all began, you might think I'm exaggerating or that I'm completely crazy. But the truth is, not even in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that the tranquility of that inn in the English countryside would bring me back to danger and pleasure. My name is Margaret Blythe, daughter of a London cloth merchant, and if there's one thing that has always defined me, it's the boredom with which I viewed the countryside. But my mother's nervous breakdown and my grandmother's death forced me to go to Aunt Lavinia's estate Old Violet Inn, which smelled of fresh bread, wildflowers, and secrets. The journey there was an ordeal. The carriage trudged along dirt roads so potholed that my entire body vibrated, and upon arrival, I was greeted by chickens roaming the courtyard, sleepy dogs lying on the stone porches, and an air that mixed the humidity of the countryside with something raw, almost primitive. Nothing there reminded me of my life in the big city. What I hadn't expected was to meet him again. Him, the boy who, years ago, had run through the fields with me, covered in dust and mischief. But now he wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man. His name was Elliot Ravenshire, still Elliot, in my mind, but now he had broad shoulders, a thick beard, and hands scarred from hard work. His back was turned, leaning against the wooden fence, shirtless, wiping the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. I thought he was a worker from the inn, until he turned and quirked one side of his mouth. "Well, if it isn't the girl from town," he said, with the thick Highland accent I'd forgotten how exciting it could be. "Elliot?" My voice was thin, weak. "My God, you've grown up." He gave a hoarse laugh and walked over to me. His scent was a mixture of hay, sweat, and cheap soap, but for some reason, it intoxicated me. "And you, Margaret, you remained stuck up, but you became even more beautiful." And that's when I realized I was completely lost. Life at that inn was monotonous. My aunt and uncle left early, tended the greenhouses and did the chores in the fields, and only returned at the end of the day. My mother remained locked in a dark room, overcome with sadness, and I, a young, cosmopolitan woman, amidst the silence and the scent of dried flowers, with only Elliot around. At first, everything was innocent. We laughed at past pranks, argued about who had pushed whom into the stream, leafed through old albums with sepia portraits and funny poses. But, little by little, his gaze changed. It was no longer the gaze of a distant cousin. It was the gaze of a man who desired, a lingering, hungry gaze, and the worst or best is that I didn't back down. I was no longer innocent either. I had already burned myself in wrong loves. I had already learned to recognize desire hidden behind a gesture. On the third night, I left the house. I was standing by the fence, my arm raised, when I heard soft footsteps on the grass. It was him. Elliot was barefoot, with an open linen shirt slung over his shoulder, and the expression of someone who hadn't slept of someone who had dreamed of me. "Still addicted to the modernity of the city, Miss Blythe?" he teased. "And you're following me now?" I retorted, not daring to turn around. He fell silent. A cricket chirped in the distance. The moon seemed to be watching. Maybe it is. I felt my throat dry. As I tried to pull away, he touched my waist with his fingertips. A firm, yet gentle touch. "Are you scared?" "Scared of what?" He didn't answer. He just moved closer, and the heat of his body behind mine sent a shiver down my spine. I looked ahead. The old tool shed was there, a few feet away. The door was ajar, as if calling. My feet moved on their own. He followed. We entered. He lit a lantern, its dim light bathing the space in gold, as if we were inside a forgotten film. Silence. He leaned closer and pressed his face against my neck. I felt the warm air of his breath. "Are you sure?" And that's where it all began. He locked the door with a wooden beam like in old movies. The sharp click echoed like a warning. but instead of fear, I felt excitement. Leaning against the plank wall, he looked me up and down, a look that uncovered more than any hand could dare. I took 2 steps, then 3, and I surrendered. He pulled me by the waist, as if our bodies had known each other forever. The kiss was urgent, hungry. His mouth found mine firmly, with desire and good-natured anger. His hand slid up my thick cotton blouse. He was in no hurry. He wanted to savor the journey. "This is wrong, isn't it?" I murmured, as if asking him to back off. But he only smiled with that crooked, captivating corner of his mouth. "Then why are you trembling?" I couldn't answer. He knelt before me. He lowered my long skirt with an almost solemn bow. And there, on a pile of hay, Elliot explored every part of me as if searching for a secret hidden between my thighs. And each time he found a more sensitive spot, he marked it with his mouth. "And you over there, tell me, have you ever experienced anything like this?" Well, that was just the beginning. If your heart is already beating faster, imagine what's to come in the next chapter. So, if I were you, I'd like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell, because, look, things are only going to heat up. I tried to contain myself, I swear, he whispered with that half smile of someone who knew he'd already won the war. "And there are calves that sleep lightly," I countered with a boldness I didn't even recognize in myself. He laughed, but didn't stop. Sir Benjamin Hargrave, the bastard nephew of the former baron of the estate, knew my body better than I did. When he lifted me with firm arms and sat me on an old grain sack, I no longer even remembered my own name, only the smell of sweat, hay, and the muffled sound of 2 bodies that, although they shouldn't have been together, were as if the world were going to end on that sultry afternoon. "Are you sure?" he asked again, as if my silence didn't say it all. Instead of answering, I pulled him toward me. From that moment on, everything was a delicious loss of control. He held me as if I were about to slip away. I scratched him with the same force as if I wanted to leave a memory on my skin, if you know what I mean. When he bit my shoulder, gently but firmly, I realized I was in dangerous territory. And worst of all, I liked it, more than I should have. "You've always been like this?" I whispered, still panting. "Like what?" "Dangerous like that." He didn't answer. He just smiled, that crooked, almost cynical smile that said everything without needing to be said. Then silence fell. Only the crickets began to sing again outside. I straightened my dress. He held me as if it were a rehearsed dance. When it was time to leave, Benjamin unlocked the door with the same wooden beam. Before opening it, he turned to me. "This is our secret, isn't it?" "Dirty secret," I corrected, teasing. "The best kind," he murmured, opening the door as if nothing had happened. But inside me, everything was upside down. The problem wasn't what we'd done, it was how much I wanted to do it again. I thought that after that, awkwardness would set in, that we would avoid each other, that regret would haunt us, but it was the opposite. The next morning, when I went down to breakfast, there he was, standing by the fireplace, his hair disheveled and his white shirt clinging to his body. He looked as if he'd slept naked, and worst of all, he looked at me with that same look of pact. A pact only ours, a silent sin. My aunt cut slices of apple pie. My mother, as always, sipped her herbal tea in silence, and I stared at the man who, the night before, had made me lose my mind over a sack of feed. "Did you sleep well, Miss Blythe?" he teased softly. I did. I smiled, sipping my tea as if his tongue hadn't been between my legs just a few hours ago. The morning passed slowly, but around noon, Benjamin disappeared from the inn. I casually asked where he was. "He's gone to take care of the milking," my aunt replied. I smiled inwardly. Funny, who had milked whom the day before? That afternoon, with my mother asleep and my aunt gone, I went to spy on him in the stable. I put on my lightest, tightest dress like someone going to pick a flower but wanting to harvest a sin. I found him crouched down, washing buckets. Sweat dripped down his temples, his hat was down, his chest damp, and he had that damned expression of someone who knew exactly what to do with his hands. "Come to inspect the cows, city lady?" he joked, looking up. "I came to see how the cattle on the property are doing," I replied, with what remained of my composure. He took off his gloves, dropped them to his side, and walked toward Meslow, determined, predatory. "Have you ever tried fresh milk?" he asked with that smile that should have been illegal. "Not yet," I murmured. "Then come, I'll show you where the most temperamental ones are." Before I could answer, he took my hand and led me to a hidden corner of the stable. Between two old tractors was a space covered by a tarp, cool shade, a dirt floor, and heat. So much heat. Not the heat of the sun, heat of the desire that surrounded us. He gently pressed me against the tractor's body. This time, there was something different in his gaze. Hunger. "You came for me, didn't you?" he whispered, pressing his body against mine. "And if I say yes?" He said nothing more. He just lowered one of the straps of my corset. A single gesture. The skin of my breast prickled with the touch of the cool air, and the look he gave me as if I were looking at a treasure. And then he tasted. Without shame, without pause. It was as if every part of me had a secret button, and Benjamin knew them all. He pressed me against the hot metal, and there I felt it, the volume, the heat, the urgency. "Are you going to do it right here?" I teased. "Are you going to stop me?" I didn't answer. I just undid the button on my dress and let myself turn. He placed me face down on the tractor hood. He pulled the fabric down to my legs, and then he knelt. His mouth came next, hot, wet, determined. He devoured me like someone who'd been hungry for days. When he finally rose, he whispered, "Now hold on." He thrust hard, furiously, with desire. One hand on my waist, the other covering my mouth, because yes, I was screaming with satisfaction. The tractor rocked, the top creaked, and I was surrendered. To heaven, to hell, and to that man who seemed to know by heart the way to satisfy me. He whispered my name softly. Then, only the sound of breathing, of bodies colliding. It was wild, it was sweaty, it was wrong, and it was perfect. When it was over, he rested his forehead against my back, sweating and laughing. "This isn't right." "But it's so good it makes me stupid," I replied, still panting. He gave my ass a light slap and whispered, "Go, before anyone sees." I left, straightening my dress, my hair, and the little sanity I had left. But, inside, I was already plotting my next encounter, because after Benjamin Hargrave, I didn't want to be a proper lady anymore. I thought that thing in the stable was the pinnacle. Ah, what a sweet illusion. And now, tell me, what would you do in my place? Comment below, I want to hear your opinion. Would you have the courage? Have you ever experienced something similar? Leave a comment and tell me everything. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the end of this spicy story. My mother was already in bed, as she always did after her verbena tea, locked in her room, listening to her muffled sighs through the thin walls of the house. I, in turn, went downstairs with my heart beating calmly, as if that night were just another one. I was ready for a solitary read in the living room when I heard a light tapping on the window. A pebble, perhaps. A whisper, perhaps. The note came soon after, slipped under the door. "Bring your pillow, I'm in the greenhouse." The greenhouse. That stuffy place at the back of the property where Aunt Mildred grew her precious herbs, exotic orchids, and peppers that burn just by looking at them. A humid, hot place where the smell of wet earth made the body boil even before the touch. I opened the door slowly. Sir Caspian Armitage sat on a wooden bench. His shirt was unbuttoned to his stomach, his sweaty chest glistening in the dim lamplight. His wide thighs were spread, his large hands rested on them. He was the very image of a farmer of the Apocalypsion who reaps more than he sows, if you know what I mean. "I thought you weren't coming," he said, without even standing. "I thought it was just another botanical pun," I murmured, closing the door behind me. He smiled. He walked toward me slowly and locked the door with the wooden latch. His body pressed against mine until I was pressed against the counter lined with pots. The smell of moss, leaves, and sweat made me dizzy, or maybe it was the way his firm hand wrapped around my neck, without violence, just control. "Tell me you want it," he whispered, pressing his lips to mine. "I want it." "How?" "I want you. Here, now." He turned me onto my back and pushed pots aside. The plants fell. Petals, leaves, everything to the floor. The sound of the belt undoing, the zipper lowering, my breath catching between my ribs. "Are you ready yet?" he whispered, brushing his desire against my skin. "Since the damn stable," I replied, panting. He laughed. That mocking laugh, wet with sin. One hand on my waist, the other gripping my hair. When he entered, the world stopped. The heat of the counter contrasted with the ice of the ceramic, my breasts against the damp marble, my moans mixed with the sound of leaves crunching under our feet. "Look at me," he commanded, pulling my hair slowly. "I want to see your face when I get there." And I saw his too. Sweaty, intense, stained with desire. A man on the brink of an abyss, and I fell with him. He turned me around. He sat me on the counter. He lifted me tightly onto his lap. Our bodies pressed together, my hips throbbing, my mouth biting his shoulder. He whispered curses in my ear, words that, in any other context, would have made me blush, but there, I begged for more. When we exploded, he bit my neck. I trembled all over. A potted fern fell. I heard the noise, but I couldn't open my eyes. I was out of my body, caught between ecstasy and madness. We stood there, embraced, like two fugitives from morality. If I'd known it was like this, I would have locked this greenhouse sooner, he murmured, laughing. And if I'd known the woods hid a cousin like that, I would have gotten lost long before. He held me down. He straightened my clothes. He kissed my forehead. And, in a knowing whisper, he said, "Go, before your mother comes to water the plants." I left the greenhouse with my panties askew, my hair disheveled, my soul in tatters. I tried to appear serene while my body still trembled. The taste of him was still in my mouth. And the question was already hammering. Where would the next time be? But the answer didn't come. Because he disappeared. There were no more messages, no glances, no disguised touches. He didn't bump into me in the kitchen. He didn't wait for me in the shed. It was as if everything had been erased with a breath. I was left there, alone, with a hot memory and my body hungry. I thought I'd done something wrong, or maybe he regretted it, or maybe it was just another one of those moments that burned brightly and then turned to ash. Then, one afternoon, sitting on the porch, I saw Caspian in the distance, in a sweaty shirt, hunched over the garden herbs as if nothing had happened. And it was there, in that silent scene, that my Aunt Mildred emerged from the doorway with an envelope in her hand. Her expression was strange, as if she were holding something too heavy for her frail body. "Caspian," she called, her voice tense. "The letter arrived." He turned. For the first time in days, he looked at me, but his gaze was no longer filled with fire. It was ice, a goodbye embedded in his irises. "The letter. What letter?" I asked, approaching. "You won't understand," he murmured. He walked over to my aunt. He carefully picked up the envelope, opened it with steady hands. He read it silently. At the end, he sighed. It wasn't relief. It was something else. A weight. A burden. "What is this, Caspian?" I insisted. He looked at me. Without anger, without regret, just a distance that cut through the air. What happened between us shouldn't have happened. I thought it was just another fling, but I understand I need to leave. Leave? To where? He didn't answer. He just walked into the house. He disappeared like a ghost, like someone who had never belonged there. I stood there, on the porch. The sun was setting behind the hills, the scent of mint wafting from the flower bed. And I, empty, without answers, without explanations. With the feeling that I had lived a delirium that, now, existed only within me. Life returned to normal. My aunt continued watering her plants, my mother with her teas, and I, with my body scarred and my heart silent. Maybe Caspian was just a shadow, a warm passage through a forgotten season, something that came to set me on fire and then disappear with the wind. But every time I pass the greenhouse, I still smell the wet earth, and I remember the sin we lived there. Maybe he's gone, but a part of him is still within me. What about you? What did you think of this story? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know if you made it this far. And if you did, tell me where you're watching from. It's always a pleasure to hear where our stories go. A big kiss, and see you in the next video.